All right. Again, I'd like to welcome you to the May installment of the National Conservation Districts Employees Association Professional Development Webinar Series. This recording of the webinar, along with all of our past webinars, can be found on our YouTube channel, which is at National Conservation Districts EA. And you can also find the link to our YouTube channel through our website, ncdea.us. And today we have Eric Shideler of the Vermillion Soil and Water Conservation District out of Indiana here to talk to us about strengthening our local work groups and utilizing that information gathered at your local working group meetings. If you have any questions along the way, we have a question and answer box, and we'll discuss them at the end of the webinar. So have at it, Eric, and thank you guys for joining us.
All right. Hey, thank you, Kelly, and good morning, everybody on the kind of the West Coast, and good midday to you East Coast folks, because it is noon Eastern Standard Time here where I'm at. But I am excited to be here today to talk about local working groups and how do we strengthen that partnership. As Kelly said, my name is Eric Shideler. I am the executive director here at Vermillion County Soil and Water Conservation District. I've been with my district about 12 years now, and we do an okay job with local working groups. So I will tell you that the information that I'm going to share today is something that it takes time, it takes some effort, and but you can do it. The things that we talk about today, they are doable. You just got to have some faith in yourselves. I also serve as the NCDEA treasurer for the board, and happy to be serving with the NCDEA board for several years now, and helping promote professional development for all of our district employees across the United States. And I will put a plug in, as Kelly already did. Make sure you're visiting us at our website to see all of the opportunities, the training opportunities that we have, and also ways to get involved on a national level with NCDEA. We want feedback. We want your thoughts about things that are going on across the country that maybe we can help address, and we can help train you on a grander scale. So please make sure you're communicating with your region representatives and also through our contact forms on the website. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. And today we are going to talk about local working groups and the value of locally led conservation planning, and how do we do a better job at promoting and getting folks involved in the local led working groups. And I've talked a lot about this over several years, the last several years, with different groups and different sessions and things like that, because I think this is one of those moments in a conservation district employee's.
Eric, I'm going to interrupt you.
Okay.
For some reason, your screen is not sharing. We did test this beforehand, and it was working there for a minute, so we'll try again.
Let's try it again. Did that?
Nope, still same thing. Oh, there we go. Okay. You are up and running.
Okay. Maybe because I just needed to click on the presentation itself. Great. Well, if that's the only technical difficulty we have today, then we'll be in good shape. So, as I was saying, local working groups are one of the things that I think in some cases districts struggle with probably the most. And some of that is attendance, and some of that is promotion, and how do we do that? So as I give this presentation, I like to give just a little brief history on local working groups and why they're important. How did we get to this point? If you've seen me do this talk before, this will be some information that probably you've seen, and bear with me with that. If you've not heard me do this before, hopefully you get a little bit of insight on local working groups and how we got where we are today. So first of all, as we talk about soil conservation, we all know the story of Hugh Hammond Bennett, the father of soil conservation, and his passion for preserving our land and our soil. And also, he is the founder of NRCS, and we just celebrated 90 years of partnership with NRCS here the last year. And so we've heard a lot about Hugh Hammond Bennett, but I think it's important to understand his vital impact in all of this, and also the impact of the 1930s Dust Bowl. And again, local working groups came out of that 2008 Farm Bill as a process for districts to provide information to the state technical committees. That's an important piece of this, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. A couple of fun resources that I like to point out to folks to learn more about some of this historical part of why we have soil and water conservation districts, why we have NRCS and things like that, is first of all, if you are a podcast person and you enjoy listening to podcasts while you travel or garden or whatever you do, there are a couple of really good podcasts out there that give some historical perspective on both the Dust Bowl, and that's showing there, and that is the American Scandal podcast on Wonderly Plus. That's a free subscription. I don't work for them. I'm not getting anything to promote them, but I have listened to that podcast, and it's really good. Kind of gives you a different perspective on the Dust Bowl and what led up to why we even had the Dust Bowl. The other one is LA Steals Its Water, and this is more of a West Coast, Western United States look at water rights and water availability. And so that's a really interesting one to listen to as well. So I encourage you, if you're into those kinds of things, to listen to those. I think they're pretty good. And the last one is the Dust Bowl documentary film by Ken Burns. Hopefully, this is one of those things that is on all of your onboarding, files for new employees that are coming into soil and water conservation districts, and they are watching this documentary by Ken Burns. He does an excellent job with talking about the Dust Bowl and what caused it and the after effects and things like that. So just a couple of things that I like to throw out there for folks to kind of get a little bit more background, a little bit more information. If any of you have any great podcasts or other documentaries that you've watched or listened to that are intriguing, send them my way. We'll have contact information here at the end. So why are local working groups important? Number one, this is your way of assessing the conservation needs in your local area and identifying those priority concerns. And hopefully that's something that we're all doing every year. But I know that this is a USDA and RCS meeting. It is not. This is a Soil and Water Conservation District, Resource Conservation District, local meeting, and you should treat it as such. Now, I'm not saying that NRCS does not have a vital role in this. They do. But your meeting should not be dictated by NRCS or the NRCS needs. It should be a portion. It should be a piece. And you can collect good information, and you can share that with NRCS as a partner, and they can get what they need to get out of it. But what information you give NRCS does not necessarily need to be the same information that you, as a district, maybe are utilizing. You can set priorities based on ranking, funding, things like that with NRCS. But then you can take that same data and you can look at your local area as a whole and what you have opportunities for and use it in a little different fashion. Okay. So it doesn't have to mimic, it doesn't have to be the same. You know, give NRCS what they need, but understand you can use it for what you need as well. Local working groups also bring out some great information on, where do we need to do our public outreach? Where we need, what educational workshops do we need to be hosting, locally? Where is that gap at? They're also good because they can enhance your program relevance. And so for those of you who need to go to a county council, you need to go to a tax board, you need to go to a county commissioners meeting, and let them understand, why are we here? Why are we viable? Local working groups help provide you data that will do that. Okay. Local working groups also can be a great asset to get buy-in from the community. This is where, you can bring in lots of different opinions, lots of different thoughts, and don't be scared of those. It's okay to bring in some of those, maybe not so commonplace thoughts to make us think, where could we be serving a different, where could we be serving a different population? It also helps improve your decision making. As a board of supervisors throughout the year, this can give your district kind of a roadmap of where our priorities lie and what decisions should we be making. You can also use this to increase funding and resource opportunities, and hopefully many of you are doing that out there. And if you're not, understand this is how we can enhance. This is how we can do more. Again, we're going to get into that here in just a minute. I do want to go back to the improves decision making locally here, and I know several places across the country. There are two big topics kind of at the forefront right now, maybe three, but I know around here there's two, data centers and large scale solar. And I think for Indiana specifically, we're also talking about water quantity now. We've really never talked about water quantity before. Lots about water quality, but in the last 3 to 4 years, we've been really talking about water quantity issues as well. So local working groups also help drive where the district should be focusing, or what resources can you be providing the people in your areas to help them make good decisions, to help them be informed. So again, these are some questions that, or some topics that maybe you can start putting into practice with your local working group. Local working groups should promote sustainable outcomes. We're going to talk about outcomes here in just a little bit, and some interesting ways that you can share those outcomes. And again, local working groups should just be an asset. They should be a strengthening asset to your district as a whole, and hopefully you're utilizing those in that way. So one of the big things that I hear a lot is, how do we get the information? Traditionally, at least in our area, and again, I know we have lots of districts across the United States, and there's lots of different ways that we can do things. So do keep that in mind. From my experience, traditionally, it's a once a year meeting dictated by a letter that comes out from NRCS that says, hey, you need to have your meeting between, For us, it's generally August and September, and you need to collect your data then so that we can send it up the chain. That's how we've done it for years. I think if the COVID era taught us anything, it's that we can flip the script, or we could rewrite the script, or it's okay to do things a little bit differently than we've done them in the past. And so one of the revelations that I had was it does not have to be this strict in this time frame data gathering time. What NRCS sends out to us is for their collection. It is for their programming and for their employees. As districts, we're a partner. We're not regulated, dictated by their set of parameters. So what does that mean? That means we can collect data anytime we want. If you have an annual meeting, for us in Indiana, it's between January and March. It's generally our annual meeting season when our districts hold their annual meetings. You could be collecting resource concerns there. You can have one of your locally led meetings there. Nobody says you only need to have one. You can have as many as you want at different times in different venues to collect the data to get ready for a locally led meeting where you bring all that information together and then you synthesize that. Maybe that's your meeting with NRCS. Maybe it's at a different time. One thing that we did during COVID, and I throw a shout out to a colleague of mine, Martha Miller in Monroe County, Indiana. During COVID, we were struggling with, we can't have any in-person meetings. How do we have our locally led and, meet all of our requirements? And she actually came up with, and again, this was locally, maybe other people across the country did that too. And if they did, great. I'm talking from local experience. She came up with a Google form and did a survey and put that out for folks, which at the time, born out of necessity, we needed to collect data. We needed to figure out a way to do that. And so that was how we did it. And actually the response was pretty good. It depends on what your response rate is to your meetings. But and one of the things that she noted was there were new folks and folks from different populations that she was currently not catering to that provided some insight, provided some input. And so we've kind of adopted that method ever since COVID as a way to just expand the outreach, expand the data collection for our locally led meetings. And so one of the cool things that you can do with that is, and I know we took that, we have a booth at our local county fair. We're there all week. And so I was like, how do we get people to fill these out? How do we get a good response rate? So I partnered with the local county library, who happened to have about 6 or 8 iPads that they use for programming at the library. And I said, hey, could we borrow those? Because we have Wi-Fi access at the county fairgrounds. And we just opened those up to our Google Form survey. And as people came through our booth, our building at County Fair, we made a point to say, hey, would you take a minute and fill out this survey and tell us about what you're concerned about? And then we incorporated a prize wheel. So if you filled out the survey, then you got to spin the prize wheel. And we had some pretty decent prizes, again, just to enhance or attract people to come and fill out this survey. Worked really well. If you design the survey well, keep it short, so people aren't spending a lot of time. They don't want to spend a lot of time. But it really was effective. It really is effective as a means to collect that data. And then, so, if we use that survey a couple of different times, then we can come into a meeting and say, yes, we have in-person stakeholders who want to be a part of this, but we also have all of this other data that we've collected throughout, the last 5 months. Let's talk about that too. Let's bring that into our wheelhouse, and how do we synthesize that? How does that shape our thinking and what we're doing? Um, you can also have, for us it was county fair, but if you're doing field days, if you're doing other educational workshops, then, put a survey out there. Doesn't necessarily have to be a Google form on an iPad. It could be you could do a paper survey. Sometimes we do surveys just for the program itself. And a lot of times if I'm serving a meal, I will make a completed survey, their ticket to get a meal. What if their locally led survey was their ticket to get a meal? And you have people collecting those as they come up to the food line. Again, being creative, but not pushy, to get this data, to get some opinions that you can at least talk about. Adding in special events, host an ice cream social, do it in conjunction with an appreciation lunch, dinner, whatever. Lots of different ways you can do this. And again, it depends on the size of your district, how many staff you have. We're all taxed with time, and we all have lots of things that we need to get done in our local areas. And sometimes we're like, that's such a burden. But local working groups and the information that we get from that should be kind of top of your list as far as importance, because that information that you're gathering should be the driver to what you're doing the rest of the year as a conservation district, in my opinion. Okay, in my opinion. Another thing that you can do to increase participation is targeted invitations. Just throwing out that blanket statement, hey, we're having another government meeting. People are like, nope, no thanks. I'm not into that. But if you target certain groups, and say, hey, we want to hear your concerns in what you're seeing based on, if you're a forestry landowner, based on what you're seeing as you walk through your woods. What are you concerned about? What do you need help with? Taking a little bit of time and creating those targeted invitations could reap some real benefit and real reward as you're developing that stakeholder list. So we get people there. What do we do? A, with them while they're there, and B, with the information that we get once we collect it. Okay. And just before we get into that, just a real quick, we do have a guidebook with NCDEA and also on the wearencpp.org website. Talks a lot about this. Okay. Gives sample agendas, things like that, who you should be, in that list, some standard who you should be inviting to your locally led groups, sample agendas that your chairman could follow to help drive the discussion, different meeting checklists, and things like that. So, if you're new to the soil and water conservation district world, if you're a new employee and you're not sure how these are supposed to be run, again, this is a district run meeting. This is your chairperson should be, sending out the invitations and running the meetings in conjunction with NRCS for their portion of it. But again, a lot of times as district employees, it falls on us to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed and all those types of things. So jump on and look at our guidebook. And we try to revamp that every now and again just to add some things in as we learn from district employees what's working, what's successful, so that we can share that. That's all. Why reinvent the wheel, as I always say, and I try not to do that. And I'm a big advocate for, let's share the wealth. If something's working well, let's share that out. Let's give, and it may not work for every district, but if it works for 1, 2, 10, whatever, we've done our job by providing you with usable types of information. So go in, check out that guidebook put together by a couple of folks on the NCDA board a few years ago, and did some incredible work with that. So we encourage you to jump over and check out that guidebook. So what do we do with the information that we get? And what do we do with those stakeholders that show up? Good friend of mine, Mike Kent, who actually serves as the Northeast Region Director for NCDEA. He is the executive director of the Dell Atlantic Conservation District in New Jersey. He's done some incredible work of successfully incorporating committees. So they take their locally led data that they gather, and they meet and they synthesize, and he has been able to then take people who have, very, very topic specific. And I put some examples there that, these are not necessarily his topics, but I'm just saying, what's going to work for you in your district if you make them topic specific. Mike's done a great job of utilizing his stakeholders, those people that show up, and getting them on committees, and then letting them take that specific resource topic, and then delving into, okay, what's the concern? How do we prioritize it? And then what types of practices can we do to address that concern? And then on top of that, how do we fund it? Where's that money coming from? What resource are we going to tap into? So for those of us that are smaller staff, now I'm going to say Mike has a pretty big staff, and so he can put resource folks in charge of those committees from his staff, and he can manage it that way. Okay, so again, great example. But what if I'm a one-person office? What if I'm a two-person office, which like most of us are? It's a slow process to get these started, but and maybe you want to do one committee or two committees to get started, to get a feel for how these are going to work. But then, do you have a trusted community member? Is there one of those stakeholders that would step up and say, "Yeah, I'll chair that committee"? Okay, now you're basically working one-on-one with that committee chairperson, and then letting them run that committee and reporting back to the board. It does take some upfront work. Not going to say it doesn't. This is not a quick and easy process. But if you really want to make local working groups impactful, this is one way to do it. And this is getting the community involved. This is getting stakeholders involved, and getting, as we looked at that other slide, generating that buy-in to why you, as a conservation district, are vital in your community. This is a great way to make that happen. Some other things that you can do. So let me say before I go on, if you are interested in learning more about what Mike Kent has done there at Dell Atlantic Conservation District, we can very easily supply you with his email. He loves to talk about it, and actually, sometimes we tag team these local working group discussions, and then he'll talk about what he does. So Mike does a fantastic job. Happy to get you his contact information if that's one of those things like, I want to know how he got him started. I want to know the nuts and bolts. He will walk you through that. Okay. But I just like to highlight what he does there. What are some other things besides developing committees that you can do? How many of you, and I can't see any of you, so this will be an internal question, but how many of you simply publish your local working group meeting summaries. How many of you actually make that information available to the general public so they can see what you're talking about? What are the concerns? What are the needs in our area? Um, I'm going to guess a vast majority of us do not do that. And I think that might be one of the simplest things that we can do, is publish those. Make it, put them on your website. If you have social media posts, there you go. There's, that could be a week's worth of content. By the way, if you've not done any social media training, I suggest you do that, because if you are on Facebook or Instagram, at least, you can schedule those posts out. So you can sit for a half hour in front of your screen and schedule out a week's worth of posts, and then you don't have to worry about it the rest of the week or the next 2 weeks. Just FYI, there are some simple strategies to make our lives easier. But are we putting that information out there for people to look at and digest? That might be one of the easiest things that we can do. Talk about what funding's been secured. Highlight practices. Again, maybe you're not doing everything, but if you highlight a small portion of that, and just really say, hey, this was our focus. I go back to forestry. Forestry, invasive species, timber stand improvement. That was our focus this year. Here's some things that we did. Here's some things that we helped landowners do. Here's some funding sources we came out with. Bam, there you go. Okay. It goes back to the old adage: how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You don't have to do everything all at once. Take them in pieces. The information that we have, you can also use to leverage more funding and partnerships. Again, bringing in those stakeholders, targeting specific people in your local community. Sitting down with your board and saying who needs to be at the table, okay? And then you, as a district employee, going back and saying, okay, who's going to contact these people and get them here? Put it back on the shoulders of your supervisors and your commissioners, or whatever you call them. I know they're called different things at different places. Okay. But put it back on their shoulders. They can do a little work too. And I know, there's some head shaking right now. Oh, my board wouldn't do that. I know. We all have those boards. But give it a shot. Okay. Give them a chance to be a part of this. What else can we do with the information? Well, we should be addressing any gaps in conservation delivery that our district is having. We should be used to address any unresolved resource concerns. So maybe you've got areas that you're working on, and you need to be looking at, okay, where do we go next? What have we done? What's worked? But where do we go next? Because the resource concern is not fully addressed yet. What's next? Celebrate any positive practices or outcomes that you have. Celebrate, even if it's a little win, even if it's a small win, celebrate it. Let people know. Put it on social media. Make sure you have pictures. Let people know the wins. Those are important. And they don't take that much time. Along with committees, another idea, another thing that you could do is developing what we call these learning networks. And this is kind of an expansion of the committee. We're talking year-round participation, but really it kind of shifts that talk from what are our priorities to what are we learning locally and how do we improve that together. And these learning networks should be very diverse groups of people that are interested in certain topics. Maybe it's urban. Maybe it is water quality. Maybe it's groundwater quality. You drive it down into something very specific. Again, we're just throwing out ideas that may or may not work for your district, but some of you have that drive to try. And maybe if you try some of these things, you'll see some success and some increased participation in those local working groups. So when we talk about making that information accessible, how do we do that? Infographics are really good. Infographics you can throw up on social media. You can put at a booth at your county fair. You can put in the, in the county courthouse. There's something that are very simple, but tell a lot of information. Because if you start rattling off how many, we saved X amount of pounds of sediment going into a local river or stream. Nobody knows how much X amount of pounds of that sediment is, or X amount of pounds of nitrogen, or whatever it is you're trying to portray. But if you can put them in something that is what people can see. And again, this is not my idea. 100% borrowed from our State Department of Agriculture started doing infographics like this, and they would put it in like train cars or pickup truck loads, or something that when you say those big triaxle dump trucks, and people are like, yeah, I know. Okay, we saved about 277 loads of those. That much sediment is not going into this water course. They can start to picture that. They know how big that truck is. They don't know how many, 336,000 or 3,654 tons of sediment. They can't fathom that. They can't understand that. But they can say, man, that's a lot of trucks lined up. And if you can kind of get an estimate on how long that line would be, oh yeah, if you started here, that line of trucks lined up nose to tail would end up here. People start to visualize that, and it starts to become real to them. So if you can somehow create your infographics that give them something that's tangible, that they can visualize, that they can see, then you're going to start to make some impact, and people are going to start to understand what you're doing, what you're saving. Okay. Again, in the infographics, you see triaxle trucks, you see tanker loads, if you're talking about liquids or things like that, but make it something that people will see and relate to. Make that information relatable. Again, these are just some quick, general ideas, not by means the only way to do it, but again, just to give you some examples of what are some things that people have done that have helped transfer that data from pretty obscure to relatable, tangible, and thought-provoking. So we've gone through a lot of information today. I hope that you have gained some things from today's presentation that you can implement in your district, or at least I hope we've given you the opportunity or the confidence to think a little bit differently. I don't want to say out of the box. Hate that. But can we be more creative on how we address local working groups? I want you to remember, it's year round. It does not have to be within a 2-month window or whatever that stipulation is. Okay? You can be doing collection all year round. Anytime you're talking with citizens of your district, of your watershed, of your county, whatever it is, you could be getting ideas on what their concerns are. Don't limit it to this little bitty data collection meeting that right before a board meeting and you have 2 people show up. Okay? This could be something you're doing year round and in many different forms. Okay? When you're inviting people to your local lead meeting, if you're holding an annual meeting or a one-time meeting, make an effort to make some intentional invitations. Pinpoint some folks or some groups that you think would provide you some good insight. Okay? Give them a personalized invitation. Say, hey, we really would like to know your thoughts at this next meeting. Okay? And again, other stakeholders, but again, try to vary your opportunities for data collection. I think that's key in some of these aspects. For your outreach, make the data accessible. Get it out there. Let people see it. Okay? People want to know. People, they really do want to know. They do care. And make it easy to understand, easy to digest. Make it relatable to everybody so that they can see, what those thousands of pounds of sediment look like. Okay? With the outreach that you're doing, again, don't try to tackle everything at once. Start with a certain topic, a certain program, be focused on that, work on getting that information out. And then as you gain more confidence, build upon that. It doesn't have to be, we're going to get all this done in 2027. No. But again, celebrate improvements. Celebrate anything that you can be doing better to get more information out to the constituents in your area. Remember to be adaptive. Okay? Failing is not detrimental. Okay? Failing just means, that didn't work, so let's try it a different way. Be adaptive. Okay? It's okay. It's okay to do that. And be accountable. Okay? I think that's one thing that folks are really looking for today, is accountability. How are we accountable to our tax-paying citizens? How are we accountable to our board members or whatever? And how are our board members accountable to those folks? As elected officials, how are they accountable to the people that elect them? Okay, we need to help them do that. Make sure that you are resource and outcome focused. Make sure that the information you're presenting is of an educational tone. In Indiana, we are non-regulatory. I know that is not the way it is across all 50 states. Some of you do have regulatory authority, but let me tell you, you catch a lot more flies with honey than you do vinegar. So remember that. Kind of keep your information and those successes in an educational tone. Address any shortfalls. And that could be in shortfalls in funding. That should be shortfalls in resource, practice, implementation, whatever it is. It's okay. People want to be want to see that accountability. They will respect that. Last but not least, celebrate the achievements. Celebrate the wins, no matter how big. Celebrate all the good things that you are doing in your district to help conserve natural resources. Celebrate those wins. Make sure you're talking about the good stuff. You need to address the concerns, but make sure we're celebrating the good stuff. Make sure we're telling the positive impact that you are having, and tell it to everybody. Okay? From experience, when you go into a county council meeting or a county commissioner meeting or whatever tax board meeting, and you're not there to A, ask for anything, or B, complain, they're going to love you. If you're here to say, hey, I just want to let you know the good things that we're doing in the district, some positive impacts that we've made, and we just want to bring that to your attention, they're going to love that. And that's easy to do. So celebrate those wins. Celebrate those achievements. All right. I am going to open it up to Kelly. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put those in the chat box. I will answer them the best that I can. If I don't have the answer, we will maybe try to find an answer for you, but we'll open it up. Kelly, if you got any questions, you can fire away.
Yeah, you do have a few here. So the first question would be for the survey, do you send a survey out before the meeting and after the meeting?
So with the survey, you have free range to do whatever. I mean, generally it's before. You're trying to collect all of that data before you have, say, an official or a set local working group meeting. You want to collect that information before so that you have something to talk about with that group. Now, which that question really does spark an interesting thought that I really hadn't thought of until right now. Maybe during that local working group, there are other questions that come up that you want to gather more information on. So does that affect your next survey? So then maybe you have a follow-up survey to gather more information. There's no right or wrong way to do this. That's the beautiful part about it. And what works for one district may not work for another, and they may do it slightly different, and that's okay. That's okay. But I think that that question poses a really neat idea that, yes, you're collecting that data before, but maybe in that you're going to send a follow-up survey to collect different information, or to clarify. Maybe you had a question on there that didn't generate what you thought it was going to generate. Maybe you need to ask it a different way. You can always resend those out and ask them in a different way. So great question. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
I hope
I
that
think that
answers.
probably yeah, I think that probably happens quite often is that the questions that we're asking when we create the questions, it feels like it should get a good answer from people, and it doesn't always land with everybody. So clarifying those questions in a different way is always a good idea. And so even like year to year, adjusting your questions and how you're asking them.
I would recommend having somebody who does not have conservation district ties maybe look over them, because what is simple and clear to us may not.
Absolutely.
A lot of times I have my wife look over them, because whenever I start talking about soil health or cover crops, her eyes glaze over. I mean, she really doesn't care. But if I have things like that, I can let her look at those and say, does this make sense to you? And she's a good one. So find somebody who you trust that may not have as much extensive knowledge in this area as you do, and have them look over it, and help you make sure that it's something that makes sense to everybody.
For sure.
Great thought.
Yes.
Great thought.
Do you have like a template of your survey that you could share, or do you know of a template of a survey that we could share out after the meeting?
At one time, under the same place where the guidebook was, I think there was a link to the survey, to an example of that survey. If there's not, we will make sure that there is an example survey put on our website, along with the guidebook. I think there was one there. I haven't checked lately, but if there's not one there, we will get a link up to that survey, or an example of, and it's in a Google form. And so, easy to use, easy to create if you're in the Google platform. And if not, find you a high school kid who needs an internship project and have them create it for you. But we'll make sure that there's an example put on our website so that it is accessible. And then, as I say to everybody, tell your friends. When you see it on there, tell your friends. You're at a region meeting or a state meeting, tell your friends, hey, this information's out there. Drive people to that website. So shameless plug.
Totally.
Shameless plug.
Yeah, we'll put it on the description box of the YouTube channel as well. So when you click on this video, it'll have a little description box at the bottom of it, and any resources that we have, I'll put links to those resources within that. Okay. Can we get a summary of the key points of this presentation, or is there kind of a key point presentation that people can take to their local boards to convince them to have a more active local working group?
I don't know that I have kind of a condensed summary. I mean, we'll definitely make this presentation in its entirety accessible. Again, we'll have Kelly put it in the link there, and you can, you can share this PowerPoint with whoever you'd like to. It is not proprietary by any way, shape, or form. I encourage you to use it, and yeah, we'll make it available.
Excellent. Okay, the surveys that you're doing, are they anonymous, or how are you tracking whether somebody has already filled out your survey through different platform methods?
That's totally up to you. If you want to, you can track through email, as on a Google form. That is something that you can do. They have to log in or whatever. They'll track that email. You can ask for identifying information if you'd like to. we do just for if it's anything, it's just we want to see who's commenting, and then if they, with a Google form, you can look at an individual response, and if they, if they're leaving comments, because we always give the opportunity to type in additional concerns or things like that, then we can reach back out to those folks and say, hey, we read what you put on the survey. We'd like to talk to you more about it, or whatever. So again, it's up to you. There are no right or wrong ways. If you just want the information and you don't care who's given it, you can do it anonymously. That's totally up to you. It's whatever you feel comfortable doing, and whatever maybe you're bored. Maybe your board's like, well, you don't want to know, and it again can be up to them. But again, there are no right or wrong ways to do these things. It's whatever works for you locally, and is getting you the best result for what you're trying to accomplish.
Very good. All right. Kara just wanted to let us know that JotForm is a great resource for surveys and registration. It's free and limited to 5 forms per month for the free program, but for most things that conservation districts are doing, 5 per month is probably more than enough. So if you guys want to look into JotForm, that would be a good resource for you guys. And then what are the best ways to promote local working group meetings? This conservation district makes posts on Facebook and invites people face to face, but they still have trouble getting a good turnout. They already provide breakfast. Any other ideas?
Well, you're hitting the big things. For number one, you're providing food, which is always or usually a pretty big hit. You might vary your time of year. I don't know, I don't know specifically, if you've always had it at a certain time of year, but you might evaluate, okay, do we need to host this at a different time of year? Again, it doesn't, that timing you could play with, it doesn't have to be within these certain parameters. So, if you're not getting a good response, maybe move that date, and play with that a little bit, and see if that, generates anything. Do you have another big event that a lot of people come to that you could maybe piggyback onto, and still host a breakfast, in conjunction with that big event? And, they're going anyway. Let's just go a little bit earlier for breakfast. We'll talk about resource concerns, and then we'll go do this other thing. Again, just kind of, sidestepping and looking at it from a little bit different angle. Be creative with what you can do with it. I think you're doing all the right things, your social media. In today's day and age, we're seeing this locally. We've lost basically all of our print media for the most part. And so, the days of putting something in the local newspaper and everybody getting that local newspaper and seeing it are gone, and so we have to rely on these electronic forms, but if you're still, I guess still the same old, print them out and just make a drive through the community and start putting them on bulletin boards that old fashioned way. It's tough. I will tell you, it is tough to get the word out. And we still have people like, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't, and yeah, I feel for you. We just got to do our best and manipulate any means possible. Get people to share it for you, get people to talk about it for you, in their avenues as well. But it's tough.
It is. One other thing to maybe think about is when you're doing social media posts, the algorithm, especially on Facebook, loves a consistent poster. So if you are not consistently posting, say like 1 or 2 times a week, then your posts that you are doing sporadically are not getting out to people. So the more consistent you are on posting stuff throughout the year, the more information people are getting from your social media posts because they are seeing it more often. So that might be something to take into consideration as well, that you just need to be a little bit more consistent in your social media posting, and then that could help spread the word a little bit. And then one thing that we did locally here to try to boost our social media was we did a contest. So we did it like a tree ID contest. And so we posted a picture of a tree and had people invite other people to answer the question, what tree is this? And as part of an entry, and then their response was an entry. And so every entry that they had, they got in for a drawing for some local SED swag. So, and it did promote our numbers quite a bit and it did help. So doing stuff like that can help as well. All right, we've got another suggestion on resources here from Carly. They use Mentimeter during their meeting. They ask participants to type one word to describe their biggest conservation concerns, and all the words then were displayed in a graphic that changed in time as people were typing in their answers. The more specific word that was typed, the larger that it became in the graphic, and it was an excellent way to gauge priorities within the participants in real time.
I like to use word clouds like that during live presentations. It really, and I did that for the Northern Plains, and we use something like that. Yeah, again, getting people involved, making those meetings interactive so they don't feel like they're just sitting there. And again, remember that you're going to have people show up who are afraid to talk. Maybe they have good ideas, but they don't want to speak up because number one, they don't feel like they're experts or or they know what they're talking about. But if you can provide some way for them to provide input in a non-invasive way, just like what you're doing, Carly, those are great. And again, we can sit there on our phone, they can type it in, nobody knows who said it, but I'm getting my resource concern out there, and maybe that builds a little confidence then to be able, oh, more people feel the way I do or think the way I do, I can go ahead and maybe speak up. So great resource to suggest there. Yes, there's lots of different interactive meeting type things. There's lots of free versions out there for people to explore. But again, great suggestion.
Perfect. All right, that wraps up all of our questions, and we're sitting at just under an hour here. So I would like to thank everybody for joining us.
I'm gonna show one quick slide, just real quick. So I'm gonna share one more time. Those are our websites, ncda.us. So make sure you're visiting that. Also, there is some local work group information on wearencpp.org. So make sure you're visiting that as well and you are subscribing to that. If you have any, again, specific questions, you're thinking about this kind of stuff, Kelly, if you would please make sure to put my NCDEA email in the comments as well. Folks, please email me. I'm happy to answer any questions as a follow-up. And if I don't know the answer, I'm happy to help, find that answer for you. But let me just leave you with this. Again, there's no wrong way to do it. If something doesn't work, try a different way. It's okay. And, try to look at things you're already doing from a different angle. And, is there a slight adjustment we can make? But hopefully you all are leaving today with some good stuff. So, and thank you, Kelly, for asking me to be a presenter today. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you, Eric. Always good information. Always do a great job. So thank you. Okay, we'll release everybody for the day. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next month.